In a world filled with violence and forgetting, one man chose to walk with God. This is the story of Noah. Of judgment, mercy, and a new beginning. From Seth to Noah, the line of faith before the flood, after the sorrow of Cain and the blood of Abel, after exile and grief had settled into the heart of Adam and Eve, God granted them another son. His name was Seth. Eve said, "God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him." And in that name, Seth, meaning appointed or granted, there was restoration. Seth was not merely another child. He represented continuity. He represented hope after loss. He represented the quiet promise that God's plan had not ended in violence. The spiritual meaning of Seth: while Cain's line developed cities, tools, music, and weapons, Seth's line developed something less visible but more powerful: worship. The scripture tells us something profound. At that time people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Genesis 4 verse 26, this is not a small statement. It marks a spiritual awakening. Through Seth's descendants, humanity remembered God. Altars were built. Prayers were spoken. Reverence was restored. Seth represents the line of faith. He is the branch through which the knowledge of God continued in a world already leaning toward corruption. Where Cain represents human effort without surrender, Seth represents human humility before God. The generations of Seth, the genealogy that follows in Genesis the 5th of may appear simple, but it carries deep meaning. Each name is a link in the chain of divine patience. Seth fathered Enosh. Enosh fathered Kenan. Kenan fathered Mahalalel. Mahalalel fathered Jared. Jared fathered Enoch. Each generation lived many years. Each generation bore children. And yet, after each life, one sentence repeats like a solemn drumbeat, and he died. This phrase echoes the consequence of Eden. Death had entered the human story. The wages of sin were unfolding slowly but surely. Yet in the middle of this pattern of birth and death, one name shines differently. Enoch, the man who walked with God. When Jared became the father of Enoch, something changed. The scripture does not describe Enoch as a builder, a warrior, or a king. It describes him in only one way: Enoch walked with God. Not once, but twice this phrase is written. To walk with God means intimacy. It means alignment. It means daily fellowship. In a world that was becoming increasingly violent and morally unstable, Enoch lived differently. Enoch, the man who walked with God. When Jared became the father of Enoch, something changed. The scripture does not describe Enoch as a builder, a warrior, or a king. It describes him in only one way. Enoch walked with God. Not once, but twice this phrase is written. To walk with God means intimacy. It means alignment. It means daily fellowship. In a world that was becoming increasingly violent and morally unstable, Enoch lived differently. He did not merely believe in God. He walked with him. For 300 years after the birth of his son Methuselah, Enoch continued in this communion. Then comes one of the most mysterious and powerful verses in Genesis. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Genesis 5 verse 24. Noah, rest in a restless world. Lamech, a descendant of Seth, not the violent Lamech of Cain's line, named his son Noah, saying, "Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands." Genesis 5 verse 29. The name Noah means rest or comfort. In a world exhausted by sin, Noah was born as a sign of hope. As corruption increased, Noah stood apart. Genesis describes him in 3 ways. A righteous man, blameless among his generation, one who walked with God. Notice the echo. Like Enoch before him, Noah walked with God. This is the thread that runs through the faithful line. Walking with God changes everything. Why the flood came. The deeper spiritual meaning of the flood. When the waters rose in the days of Noah, it was not merely rain falling from the sky. It was a mirror held up to humanity. The flood was not simply about destruction. It was about revelation. It revealed what happens when the human heart drifts too far from its creator. Genesis tells us that violence filled the earth. This word implies more than physical aggression. It speaks of injustice, exploitation, corruption of relationships, misuse of power. Humanity had not only forgotten God, it had reshaped morality according to its own desires. The flood, then, becomes a spiritual symbol. Water in Scripture often represents cleansing. Before the flood, the earth was morally polluted. After the flood, the earth was washed. It was as if God allowed the waters to return the world to a state of beginning again, echoing Genesis 1, when the Spirit hovered over the waters. In judgment, there was also renewal. But why such a drastic act? Because unchecked evil spreads. Like yeast in dough, like poison in blood, corruption grows when it is not confronted. The flood teaches us that sin is not private, it affects communities, generations, even creation itself. Yet the flood also reveals something profound about God's character. The story of the flood reminds us that righteousness still matters, and that grace still speaks. If this message touched your heart, join us at Sacred Voices of Faith, where faith is heard and hope is renewed. Subscribe and continue this journey through Genesis with us.